Hey, g'day guys, Daniel here from Caravan Industry Victoria, and today I'm joined by Linda Hitch from Hitch Engineering, and we've got Gary Gardner also from Hayman Reese. So obviously got a wealth of expertise here to talk everything about brakes today. So we're sort of going to go through the legal requirements around brakes, and then we're going to show you some pictures and images about how they work, but obviously a very important topic. Hey, Linda.
Oh, absolutely. One that I think sometimes people would benefit if they understood the different categories within the brakes as well, and just probably being aware of how to operate and how to stop safely in a situation, maybe when you're going to be coming unstuck.
Yeah, exactly. And Gary, obviously from your expertise, mate, as well, been dealing with towing and hooking up and the like for a long time, but obviously that critical aspects around then joining the brakes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes people take it for granted that their caravan or their trailer has got electric brakes on there or some sort of braking system on there, but don't really understand how it's there, what it's doing, how to be adjusted. They just sometimes jump in the car and think, oh, well, it worked last time, without giving too much thought about, you know, is it still adjusted correctly from a brake controller point of view anyway? Yeah, so we need to cover that off for them.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and you touched on a great point there, Gary, is, you know, they think they may have it, but then there's also the aspect of the car and making sure that the car's got the brake controller and all that as well. So the caravan might have it, but it's important to make sure your car's got it as well.
Yeah, I mean, from a mechanical point of view, the brakes are normally adjusted on the caravan itself, you know, when the van's serviced, you know, at every 5,000 or 10,000 Ks, whatever their service schedule is. But very few people give attention to just checking that adjustment of the electric brake controller to make sure the electrical side is working correctly, to make the mechanical side do its bit down the, you know, on the caravan itself.
Yeah, exactly right. So what we'll do is we're going to sort of start, we sort of start with rules and regulations to start off with. So Linda will get you to sort of go through, as stated here on VSB1, and chime in anytime you need to, Gary, and I'll jump in and say probably nothing because you two are the experts.
Thanks, mate.
So as we've stated in some of our other sessions, VSB1 is the document that the industry uses, and it is used by, obviously, as we've stated, manufacturers, suppliers, and the consumers. And so within VSB1, within section 15, you'll find there's a part under braking. And all the information in VSB1 for braking comes directly from ADR 38, ADR 38 being the Australian design rules. And this is what all caravan manufacturers must comply to with their caravan brakes. So in a nutshell, just because some people are confused as to when do you need them, when do you not need them. Anything up to 750 kilos from a GTM perspective does not require trailer brakes. You can put them on there, but by law they're not required. Over 750 kilos to 2,000 kilos, you have to have some form of braking, and there's obviously different options in there. You can have electric, we'll go in detail, overrun brakes. If you are up to 2,000 kilos and if you have 2 axles, only one of those needs to be braked. You could have 2, but at a bare minimum 1 has to be braked. And then anything over 2,000, both axles, if you've got 2 axles, then both of those over 2,000 need to be braked in some way from the driver's seat when you're towing, if that makes sense.
That does to me. Does it make sense to you, Gary?
It makes sense, yeah. Yep.
Well, because I get questions about, okay, when do you need them on 1 brake, on 2 brakes? I just keep saying over 2 ton, GTM, not ATM, that's the other thing they get confused about, GTM, they need to be on all brakes.
Yeah, and that's probably something that's misunderstood as well. They just assume that they hear trailer must have brakes above 750 kilos GTM. So the campfire experts will say, well, that means it has to be electric.
Yep.
They don't always understand that, up to 2 ton GTM, they only have to have one of the axles braked.
Yep.
Anything above 2000 GTM, all axles must be braked and have to be controlled by a controller inside, as you said, from the driver of the motor vehicle themselves.
Except for overrun brakes, because then they're the only ones that you don't need to, because that's a mechanical connection and it's not electrically. Now probably is a good time to go into that, right?
I'm ready. I just click the button. That's all I'm here to do.
So when you look at your coupling, and this is a good illustration using Alco, so your overrun depends on a mechanical system. There's not a relay coming in from the driver's seat. So the principle of it is that, oh, maybe I should use one of my little demonstration tools.
You could use your Lego that is in the background, as it looks like you're going into the virtual show to pick out something. Just can't see it because it's pulling.
There we go.
That's better.
So what happens when this draw vehicle, when the tow vehicle brakes on that coupling, this motion of the caravan causes, and if you have a look on that illustration, the internal mechanism to push on that brake rod that you can see right there, Daniel. Yep. And then that engages the brake. So it's purely a mechanical connection in that regard. And so this is where I think some of the confusion happens with people, because they don't have a controller in the front. All they know is they connect the coupling and they connect their breakaway and they're off, and they have no idea that their brakes are actually being controlled internally, housed within that coupling.
Yeah, I think probably with overrun brakes, they're not very common in our industry that are manufactured in Australia, but they're very big in Europe. I know, Gary,
Europe, and I think historically we saw more of them in the past in older caravans, whereas now, would you agree with that, Gary?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. As technology improved and brake controllers became, let's say, the normal or an easy to obtain and easy to wire in component, it sort of got rid of the need for those mechanical override style ones. Yeah.
I think what's probably important to them, you sort of see it here, that the overrun brakes are they can't exceed 2 tons GTM, which is in the regs as well. I know that's sort of been talked about and reviewed and all that sort of stuff, but that's sort of the guiding principle, because it's sort of designed for those lighter trailers. And as Gary talked about, the electric brakes and the technology these days just is so common in that aspect. So.
And it's just easier because you've got your trailer plug anyway. And so the electrics for the operation of an electric brake system is essentially direct. It's just clipping it together, and you don't need to worry if you get it correctly installed, obviously.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. They need to be aware though too that, as you look at your trailer coupling that has the overrun style brakes on them, that there is the little lockout mechanism as well, which, if they have that, which is designed for, when you are reversing, say, a trailer up over a gutter or over, upwards a hill, you engage the lockout slide. But if that's engaged while they're, on a highway type driving scenario and they then push the brake on the car, then that lockout will actually prevent the trailer brakes from activating as well. So I think, as users of the trailer or the caravan, we need to make sure that we understand where that lockout is and how it impacts the braking of the trailer if it is engaged.
We sort of got we had a wiring diagram here, Linda. You probably, the trailer plug connectors and the pins are sort of listed up there. But
this is where I was saying the popularity of the electric brakes as well. As you can see, this is your typical 7-pin connector. And it just highlights how it's all wired in. But I wanted to highlight the blue electrical line on the single on one side and then on the twin on the other, on the tandem, and just to show how it is all engaged, so that when you're plugging in your connector, this is what you're plugging in. You're plugging in all your lights and So it'll be your stop lights, your indicators and so on, your side markers, but also it's engaging the blue line, which is required for your brakes. And when this is obviously the image on the right is obviously for a tandem setup that's over 2 ton, which most caravans sort of sit in that 2 ton, unless you're looking at the smaller little pop up that go, but you know, the bush bashing ones that are like the raw canvas, you know, they're generally under the 2, but most likely you'll get them within that range with both axles braked.
Yeah, I think just to sort of, you made me probably think about it a little bit more, and you know, the campers and tent trailers and the like, a lot of those, you know, particularly probably not so much now, they're a lot more loaded, but you know, probably 5 years or so ago, they were right on that borderline of the 750 kilos, and you probably need to be aware of that, where it sits in the product that you buy. So if you buy a used or an older one, or you've got one, you probably need to be aware of, you know, your brakes and make sure you've got them if you're over 750 kilo GTM. In a couple of other sessions, we'll talk about what GTM means, but you just got to be making sure that, you know, you've got the brakes over that 750 kilos.
Well, and the other thing that's worth noting here, if you are planning to do an ATM upgrade, and if your GTM sitting at the 1800, 1900, if it goes up, you need to make sure that your brakes are then suitable, because it will be over 2 ton. Yeah. So there's a lot of things you'll need, the breakaway as well. So there's added costs there.
Yeah, correct. Now, Gary, I know, you know, in preparation for this talk, you talked about maintenance of brakes and the like, and particularly going to specialists. You know, did you want to just sort of cover that off and, you know, educate the viewers about what's important about that sort of stuff, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's, you know, when you own a caravan or camper trailer that does have electric brakes or even mechanical brakes on there, it's certainly good for you to know how the brakes need to be adjusted. So there is a particular process on, you know, getting access to the backing plate and winding the spreading screw, or whatever you want to call it, inside the actual mechanisms themselves. It's good to know how that works and what the process is behind setting them up. But really, you know, these are what stopped that caravan from, you know, having any issues with braking. So by all means, educate yourself to understand how to do it. So if in an emergency, you know, you're broken down in the middle of somewhere, you can at least get underneath there and adjust the brakes, so you've got some sort of braking capacity. But in an ideal world, as I said, these are an important safety factor of your caravan or camper. So it is worthwhile having an expert do it for you. You know, make sure it is part of the servicing process of whoever does your van servicing every 5,000 or 10,000 Ks, whatever you decide is your normal servicing schedule. Make sure that the adjustment of the brakes is part of that process to stop the van when you really need to rely on them.
Yeah, exactly. Also, you sort of touched on a little bit earlier about the brake monitors. There's obviously a plethora and different varieties of the like, but you also talked about adjusting that to suit probably each of your travels and you know the strength of the brakes and all that sort of stuff. Did you want to sort of just give some insights from your experience about, you know, the brake controllers in themselves, but also then adjusting them as well?
Yeah, no worries, Daniel. Simply speaking, there's 2 types of brake controllers in the market. There's what we call proportional or pendulum style braking units, and then there's timer-based type units. How they work are 2 very, very different things. The proportional style one has become far more popular over the last few years. That a lot of the big units like the Hayman Reese, you know, compact IQs, or the Taconcha brake controllers, even the Red Arc Tow Pro, you know, these units are proportional type braking systems. So that means is the rate of deceleration to which your car is slowing down at when you put your foot on the brake, that is, the output from the controller is matched to the braking system on the actual caravan itself. So you're going to have a nice, even, nice, steady and consistent braking performance between the tow vehicle and the camper or the caravan. Where timer-based units are a little bit more old school. They're basically on or off, but you can control how much on there is. So the best explanation I give people is, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, and you know, even a lot of houses now, maybe you might have a dimmer switch on some of our lights in our house. So that dimmer switch is effectively like a timer-based brake controller. The more you have it wound up, the more braking you'll get out of a timer-based type controller. And it's the same rate of deceleration or same amount of braking every single time you put your foot on the brake. So the camper trailer doesn't know whether you're slowing down from 100 kilometres an hour and you're really braking heavy to avoid an obstacle or to slow down, or whether you're pulling up at a set of lights after driving through town at, say, 20 or 30 kilometres an hour. A timer-based controller won't know the difference. It'll just give you the same braking force every single time you put your foot on the brakes. Clearly, you can wind that up and down as you are driving, but to get a better response, those proportional ones are by far, they're more of a set and forget. So once it's set up to the right power, the controller, every time you put your foot on your brake in the car, it'll read how quickly you're slowing down, and it'll give the output to the van brakes at the same rate of deceleration as the actual tow vehicle itself. So that's why they are a better unit on that side of things.
Yeah, for sure, mate. I think, there's obviously many are out there in different types. I think, we've always said in a lot of our talks, you make sure you go speak to the experts and, you service and repair companies, but you've obviously got the caravan shows and everything that goes on. But, the likes of Heyman Reese, obviously, as experts in that field, you just always want to make sure you get the right advice from those people. Over the last probably 10 years, I've noticed, a lot of imitation, so to speak. So we always recommend you go to see the appropriate people. Before we move on to breakaway devices and what was mentioned in the regs there, and then handbrakes as well, is there anything else from either you, Linda, or Gary, you think we should sort of touch on in terms of the brakes and electric brakes before we sort of move on?
We could show one of the images of what a basic electric brake looks like, and that will touch on Gary's comment of servicing and keeping them frequently serviced, because there's obviously parts within the electric brake system. So like one of those there, that'd be great.
Yep. Yeah, agree with a nice big image showing the adjuster screw and the whole lot.
That's American. Will this be all right?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So just to help explain, so on this image, there's the label where it says magnet. So the magnet is what gets excited when you apply your brakes. And what that does is that essentially opens up your shoe by way of the actuating arm, and then that presses against the wall of the drum, and that's how it will stop the motion. So obviously when we're looking at this system here, the brake shoe, the lining, so it's like in your vehicle, the brake pads, they will wear over time, and this is why it is imperative that you make sure you get those checked frequently, because what will happen if you wear those shoes down, they will start eating into the hub, which then will require, your drum, and then that will require a lot of work to either machine or replace. So that's a costly exercise where I strongly recommend, when people ask, definitely keep on your maintenance for your brakes, because that will also affect your brake efficiency. And the brake efficiencies are all required part of ADR 38 for suppliers, that they need to meet that specification. So there's a lot of limits that need to be met. So when the caravan manufacturer is supplied with a brake package, it has been designed to meet the minimum requirements.
Yeah.
So, and as the caravan owner, you are responsible, once you purchase that caravan, to make sure that your brake is correctly maintained, because that will, I'm fairly confident, will void your warranty, and I think from an insurance standpoint as well, will be very costly.
Yeah, for sure. Gary, was there anything else, mate, on brakes before we move on to the other brakes?
Just one, I suppose, just on building on what Linda said there as well, is that magnet there is, while the rest of the components are all really important, without the magnet,
yeah,
none of that parts will work anyway. So I think as users of our van as well, and those of us that are doing our own servicing or maintenance, if we do ever have to replace that magnet, make sure we are getting the right one.
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, there is actually an on-road and an off-road style magnet. And if you use an on-road style magnet in an off-road camper trailer and then go and do the Strzelecki track or Cape York or something like that, over time you will damage that magnet. So I suppose make sure when you are replacing any components that you are replacing them with the right one, which is suitable for the work that's going to be performing.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll sort of, I think we might move across to breakaways, and as it sort of reads in the regulation, it sort of talks about here every trailer over 2 tonnes must have a operating on all wheels, which Linda talked about before. But the brake system must be able to cause immediate application of the trailer in the event the trailer becomes detached from the towing vehicle. So in essence, if it comes disconnected from the car, you've got to be able to have something that engages the brakes. And then it's got to be able to be applied for at least 15 minutes. So that's obviously to make it stop as well. So we've got a picture here, and probably a couple of things, because first of all, people are probably going to be wondering, well, what does this mean? So what we've got is a picture of a drawbar, and there's a little black box on there, and you can see a wire that goes to it. So typically in our industry, it's known as a breakaway or breakaway device. And then there's this picture here, which shows what happens. So I'll throw it over to you two to sort of talk about what happens with this, but it's obviously an important safety factor and a device once you get over that 2 tonnes, because those vans are very, very heavy at that weight.
Yeah, and the reason why they do this is because essentially it is surprisingly, the coupling can dislodge, and we discussed this in another session, Danny, where we touched on sometimes you don't realize it just gets jammed up and you think it's coupled, but in actual fact it's not. And even though you still will have the chains attachment, legally you need to have, again, for over 2,000 kilo GTM, a breakaway system. And it's a very, very smart little system where there is a pin connection, and again, electrically powered. As soon as the coupling is unjoined, the tension on it pulls out the pin. And now you'll notice in the image here, your breakaway will always be at a shorter length than the chains. That's the other thing. This is why the chain lengths are also important. And then as soon as that pin comes out, it will engage the brakes on the trailer. And again, I know I keep talking about ADR 38. This is why brake suppliers have to meet this ADR 38. So if you do your own brakes, make sure that they're ADR approved, because it will ensure that those brakes are held for the 15 minutes. So this essentially engages your brakes.
Yeah, exactly.
And it means that if it comes off, the car behind you will not have a 2-tonne caravan hurtling towards them, which wouldn't be a pretty sight.
No, it wouldn't. So Gary, obviously, I know we've sort of looked at these a lot through some inspections that we've done as well, but obviously in your past, mate, pretty important device. As I just need you to mute, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, the connection of that breakaway point itself on the motor vehicle is even important. You know, there's no point connecting it to the tow bar tongue itself, or if you're running a weight distribution hitch, there's no pointing, you know, I'm putting it a spare hole on there. The actual, sometimes it's a little D shackle, sometimes it might be a little, you know, quick release spring loaded type carabiner. Whatever it is, it really needs to be connected to a fixed part of the motor vehicle. So if and when, you know, God forbid, you know, a trailer tow bar tongue actually snaps in half, then there's no point of the breakaway if it's connected to the wrong side of the broken part of the tongue. So fixed part of the motor vehicle is probably the first thing to consider. And also, it's often overlooked that these are electrically controlled. So once that pull pin is pulled out of the breakaway switch itself, it requires the electrical power to bring on, you know, to energize the magnets and engage the hubs and everything else, and so that the caravan can't go anywhere. But if you're not charging that battery that controls that breakaway system, which, you know, it should be on a battery on the actual vehicle, the caravan itself, if it's not being charged, or if it's in a bad condition or poor condition, then the breakaway, again, it will pull the pin, but there won't be enough electrical power there to actually engage the brakes and do what they need to do. So they're the two, I think, from my side of things, they're the two critical points: connection onto the motor vehicle and charging and maintaining of the electrical aspect of the breakaway system.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because the brake controller for the, in essence, the battery that sits with that breakaway device, if you've got that sitting around, you've got to make sure you continually get that maintained and make sure it's working, because the worst thing that could happen is that battery's flat and it comes disconnected and you have an issue.
Yeah, that's it. The brakes just won't engage. It's not doing what it's designed to do.
Yeah, correct.
Something else too, Linda sort of touched on there with, if this becomes attached, then you know what, the caravan, running backwards into the car behind you, well, the operation of the breakaway system is also required to energise the brake lights on the caravan as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the car behind you can see that something has gone wrong and that the van is slowing down. They might not see the car's brake lights, so they need to see the van brakes lights come on, so they know that something is happening to that caravan. It is slowing down, whether it's in a hurry or whether it's gently, that the car behind or the vehicle behind is not going to suddenly run into the back of it, because they don't get that visual indication that the actual caravan is slowing down.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's sort of a good lead in, and I was looking at this picture here of the handbrake on here. But Gary, we might get you to have a chat about the joyfulness of the handbrake, as I'll re-bring up that picture that we had previously of the drawbar, and you can sort of see the Y there with which connects to the handbrake there. And that's not the greatest picture, but you can sort of see the handbrake here, and the levels, as I call them, where it can be clipped in, and the tension. Now these are designed obviously not to be on when you're traveling, but obviously when you're set up and your parks. I know there's been conversations about these when you're on inclines and all that. So do you want to have a chat about the joyfulness of the handbrake on the caravans, mate?
Yeah, I'll start with that comment you just made about, they're not to be pulled on when you're actually driving down the highway. Unfortunately, I think there's many of us that have experienced it, forgot to release the handbrake, or we've seen others forgotten to release the handbrake, and the damage that can occur to the braking system, that is the shoes and everything else inside the hubs and drums, the damage that can occur if you do drive for a significant amount of time with that handbrake engaged. It's not a pretty sight. So yes, definitely you are right. It's almost one of those last checks you do before you jump in the driver's seat and drive away. Make sure that your handbrake is disengaged. In the same sort of context too, you've got to make sure that it is adjusted correctly. So you can adjust, around about where those you are circling now. There is a threaded screw which can be wound in or out depending on which, whether you need more adjustment or less adjustment, so that when you do pull that handle, it does apply the braking force to the actual hubs, at the right, enough to hold the van steady when you are parked up. Again, what you said too, the argument about how good are they? Well, they're as good as the adjustment, they're as good as the brake shoes, they're as good as the condition overall of everything. So it's, you wouldn't park this coming down a really sharp, steep incline and expect that everything's going to be okay. They're not. They're holding 2.5 ton, 3.5 ton vans sometimes. So you want to make sure that the components are in good condition, the adjustment is okay. But if you are on, a reasonable incline, and that's, reasonable incline is how long is a piece of string sort of comment. We can't say how efficient they will be, but anything where there's a chance the van could roll by itself if the handbrake wasn't engaged, well, you should be handbrake and chocking the wheels as well, to make sure that the van can't slide. If the handbrake does become detached, or if it's not adjusted correctly, it's not going to roll off down the incline or the decline by itself. So there's some really good videos around on YouTube and stuff on how to adjust these. There's a couple of different styles, but they're pretty much the same basic principle. The shorter you make the adjustment screw, the tighter the cable becomes. Therefore, the less pulling or the less pressure you need to put on the actual pull handle itself to apply the handbrake or park brake, whichever one you call it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll just stop sharing there, and Linda, you jump in.
Yeah, just a little further in relation to that. Just through many of my activities, through inspections and ATM upgrades, I have found the condition sometimes of the cables for that handbrake being worn. So where it's being taken over really rough terrain and they have a lot of gravel hitting the surface, some of the cables will have a protective sleeve over them. Some of the older ones don't. So make sure that you keep on with the maintenance, have a look at them, make sure that the cable's not frayed or anything like that.
It's like anything with caravanning, isn't it, really? If you regular maintenance, regular inspections, at least, even if you're not maintaining it every 5,000 Ks, at least throw your eyes over all these critical parts every 5,000 Ks, just to make sure that you're starting to see anything which could potentially become an issue before your next service.
Yeah.
Correct. And if anything's hanging out, nothing should be really hanging out at the bottom of a caravan. So if something's swaying, it warrants further investigation. Have a look at what it's come out of or come off of, because that's not correct.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say about hanging out. That would be nice in the joyful time that we're living in, Linda, you and I in Melbourne, when we're locked down. That would be nice to hang out. But you're definitely right. If there's something hanging out that shouldn't be with your brakes, you definitely got a problem. It definitely needs to be serviced.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, for us guys, it probably gives a bit of an overview about brakes and the importance of them, obviously a critical safety aspect, but, you know, we like to give you the information about what the rules are, how it should work, but also some key tips. So before we wrap it up, was there anything else you guys think that we should cover? Has the silence sounds like we've got it all. So with that, I'll wrap it up and say, obviously, thanks for joining us.